It was supposed to be a quiet night. Just a quick stop at the hotel she owned, her flagship property, the one she'd poured her heart into for years. She'd flown in late after a long business trip, tired but proud. The lobby gleamed under soft golden lights, marble floors reflecting the chandeliers above. Everything looked perfect, exactly how she'd imagined it when she first drew up the plans on a napkin during a red-eye flight years ago. She walked in wearing a simple black coat, her hair pulled back, no makeup, just the kind of look you'd have after 10 hours in the air. No flashy jewelry, no designer handbag slung over her shoulder, just her, a small carry-on, and the kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your bones. She approached the front desk with a polite smile, ready to check in like any other guest. The young man behind the counter barely looked up. He tapped on his keyboard, eyes fixed on the screen, voice flat. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," she said calmly. "Under my name?" He finally glanced at her, then back at the screen. A pause, then another. His fingers stopped moving. He frowned slightly, like something didn't add up. He said, more to himself than to her. "I don't see it." She leaned in slightly. "Try again. It's definitely there. Suite 1201, paid in full." He typed a few more keys, slower this time. Then he shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am. Nothing under that name. And honestly," he paused, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting, "we don't usually get guests like you here." The words landed like a slap. Not loud, not shouted, but sharp, cold. The kind of comment that pretends to be helpful but is really just a quiet dismissal wrapped in fake politeness. She didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but inside something shifted. That familiar ache, the one she'd learned to carry since she was a girl, told she didn't belong in certain rooms, rose up again. Only this time it wasn't just any room. This was her room, her hotel, her dream. She took a breath. "Let me speak to the manager," she said, voice steady. The clerk hesitated, then shrugged. "Manager's not on duty." "Then who's in charge right now?" He pointed toward a woman in a crisp navy blazer standing near the concierge desk, chatting with a bellhop. She looked polished, confident, the kind of person who knew how to run things. The CEO watched her for a moment. She'd seen that woman before in staff meetings and training videos. She was the night operations lead, someone she'd personally approved for promotion. She walked over, calm but deliberate. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm trying to check in, but there seems to be an issue." The woman turned, smiled politely, then her eyes narrowed slightly. Not with recognition, but with something else. Suspicion, judgment. It was hard to tell, but the warmth in her smile vanished. "Of course," the woman said, voice smooth but distant. "Let me see what I can do." They walked back to the front desk together. The CEO repeated her request, Suite 1201, under her name. The woman typed, frowned, then gave a tight-lipped shake of her head. "I'm sorry," she said, "but there's no record of that reservation. And, well, this is a high-end property. We have certain standards." The CEO didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She just reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. With 2 quick taps, she opened an email, confirmation of her reservation sent directly from the hotel's own booking system. She turned the screen toward the woman. The woman glanced at it, then looked back at her face, and for the first time something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but she recovered quickly. "Even if this is real," she said carefully, "I'd need to verify your identity." "For security reasons," the CEO nodded slowly. "Of course. Would you like to see my driver's license? Or maybe my ownership documents?" The woman blinked. "Ownership?" Before she could finish the sentence, the CEO reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a leather folder. She flipped it open. Inside was a photo ID, and right beneath it the official certificate of ownership for the entire hotel chain. Signed, notarized, real. The color drained from the woman's face. A hush fell over the lobby. A couple checking in nearby stopped talking. A bellhop froze mid-step. Even the soft jazz music playing overhead seemed to fade into the background. The CEO didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just looked the woman in the eye and said quietly, "I built this place so everyone would feel welcome, especially people who've been told they don't belong." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But tonight," she continued, You made me feel like a stranger in my own home, the woman stammered. I didn't know. No, the CEO interrupted gently. You didn't bother to find out. She closed the folder, slipped it back into her bag. Then she turned to the front desk clerk, who was now staring at his shoes like they held the answers to life. Both of you, she said, report to HR first thing tomorrow morning. Not for punishment, for retraining. Because if you can't see a person for who they are, only what you assume they are, then you don't understand what this hotel stands for. She turned and started walking toward the elevators. But before she stepped inside, she turned back. Oh, she added, and send someone to bring my luggage up to Suite 1201 and maybe leave a pot of chamomile tea outside the door. It's been a long night. The elevator doors closed. In the lobby, silence stretched like a held breath. Guests exchanged glances. Some looked shocked. Others nodded slowly as if they'd just witnessed something important, something real. Upstairs, in the quiet luxury of her suite, she finally let herself exhale. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out over the city lights. Years of work. Late nights. Doubters who said a woman like her could never run a luxury brand. And yet here she was. But the victory didn't feel sweet. It felt heavy. Because the real pain wasn't being denied a room. It was realizing that even after all this success, the world still saw her through the same old lens. Still, she wouldn't let it break her. She'd built this hotel not just as a business, but as a promise. A place where dignity wasn't earned by how you looked or what you wore, but by the simple fact that you were human. And tomorrow? Tomorrow she'd make sure that promise was honored. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with action. Because real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about making them see you and everyone else with clearer eyes. She poured herself a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let her shoulders relax. Outside, the city hummed on, unaware of the quiet revolution that had just taken place in its heart. But she knew, and that was enough. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Suite 1201, soft and golden, like honey poured over the city skyline. She'd slept surprisingly well, maybe because the weight of the night before had finally settled, or maybe because she knew what came next wasn't about anger anymore. It was about change. She sat at the small writing desk by the window, sipping black coffee from a plain white mug. No fancy china, no silver tray, just the quiet ritual of waking up and gathering her thoughts. Her phone buzzed, not with calls or texts, but with a single email notification from HR. Subject line, follow-up, front desk incident. She opened it. The message was formal, careful, full of corporate phrases like regrettable misunderstanding and commitment to inclusive service. But underneath the polished words, she could feel the panic. They were scrambling, trying to fix something before it became a story. Before it went public, she didn't want it to go public. Not for drama, not for clicks. She wanted it to go deep, into the culture of the place she'd built with her own hands. By 9 a.m., she was in the staff break room, not the executive suite. No fancy chair, no nameplate, just a folding table, a pot of weak coffee, and two nervous faces sitting across from her, the front desk clerk and the night operations lead. Both looked like they hadn't slept. She didn't sit at the head of the table. She pulled up a chair beside them. I'm not here to fire you, she said right away. Their shoulders dropped an inch. But I do need you to understand something. She leaned forward, hands resting on the table. Last night wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever walked into a place like this and felt like they had to prove they belonged. Maybe it was because of how they looked, or how they dressed, or the sound of their voice, and she paused. You didn't see me. You saw a story you'd already told yourself, and that story cost you, cost us, something real. The operations lead swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. I know, the CEO interrupted gently. That's the problem. You didn't think at all. And that's on me, too. Because if our training doesn't stop that kind of thinking before it happens, then we've failed. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard on the wall, grabbed a marker, wrote 3 words. See, respect, serve. This, she said, tapping the board, is our new guest promise. Not just for VIPs or big spenders, for everyone who walks through that door. Then she turned back to them. Starting today, you're both part of a new pilot program. You'll help redesign our onboarding training, not from the top down but from the ground up. Because you were in that moment. You know what went wrong. Now help us fix it. Their eyes widened. Not punishment. Purpose. Later that morning, she gathered the entire night shift team in the hotel's small conference room. No executives. No PR people. Just housekeepers, security guards, front desk staff, the people who actually keep the place running while the world sleeps. She didn't give a speech. She asked questions. What's the most disrespectful thing a guest has ever said to you? When did you last feel proud to work here? What would make you feel truly seen on the job? At first, silence. Then slowly voices rose, hesitant at first, then stronger. A housekeeper talked about being mistaken for just staff, even when she was fixing a guest's broken lamp in their suite. A security guard shared how guests sometimes cross the street when they see him in uniform, even though he's the one keeping them safe. She listened. Really listened. Took notes. Didn't interrupt. Didn't offer quick fixes. Just held space for their truth. By lunchtime, something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in the air. Like the hotel itself was breathing differently. That afternoon, she called an emergency meeting with the regional leadership team. They expected damage control. Instead, she handed them a one-page plan titled, The Belonging Initiative. No jargon. No buzzwords. Just clear actions. Mandatory bias awareness workshops co-led by staff. Anonymous guest feedback tied to team bonuses. A guest of the week spotlight in the lobby featuring real people. Not models staying at the hotel. With their stories with permission shared on a small digital screen. One exec cleared his throat. This is bold. But won't it slow down operations? Training takes time. She looked at him evenly. What's the cost of losing someone's trust in 30 seconds? That's what happened last night. And trust isn't built in boardrooms. It's built at the front desk in the elevator in the hallway when no one's watching. He didn't argue after that. By evening, the changes were already rolling out. New signage appeared near the entrance. Everyone belongs here. Not flashy. Just simple black letters on warm wood. Housekeeping carts got small cards. Thank you for letting us care for your space. The front desk got a new policy. Assume every guest is exactly who they say they are, until proven otherwise, with kindness. But the real test came 2 nights later. A young woman walked in, early 20s, wearing thrift store boots and a hoodie. Hair dyed electric blue. She dragged a duffel bag behind her and looked around like she wasn't sure she was in the right place. The same front desk clerk from the CEO's night was on duty. He saw her, hesitated for half a second, old habits flickering, but then he smiled. Not a forced one. A real one. Welcome, he said. Checking in? She nodded, surprised. Yeah, I want to stay through a local art contest. Didn't think it'd be this fancy. He typed quickly, then handed her a key card. Suite 804, great view of the river. And hey, if you need extra towels or anything, just call down. No request is too small. She blinked. Thanks. Really? As she walked toward the elevators, she glanced back like she couldn't believe how easy it had been. Upstairs, the CEO watched from the mezzanine balcony, unseen, unnoticed. She'd been checking in on the changes, quietly observing. When she saw the interaction, she didn't smile. She just nodded. That was it. That was the win. Later, she sat alone in the hotel's rooftop garden, the city lights twinkling below. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an old mentor. Heard what happened. Proud of you. But remember, real change isn't a moment. It's a million small choices, she typed back. Then I'll keep choosing. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. There would be more missteps, more quiet biases hiding in plain sight. But now the door was open, literally and figuratively. The next morning, she checked out like any other guest. Paid her minibar bill, just a bottle of water, left a generous tip for housekeeping, and walked out the front door without fanfare. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, she paused. Turned back, looked up at the hotel's grand facade, the place she'd dreamed of, fought for, and now reshaped from the inside out. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a statement. A promise kept. Not perfect, but trying. And sometimes that's the most human thing of all. She hailed a cab, gave the driver the address of her next meeting, and slid into the back seat. As the city blurred past the window, she thought about the young woman with the blue hair, about the housekeeper who finally felt seen, About the clerk who chose to believe instead of doubt. That's where real power lives, not in corner offices or press releases, but in the quiet courage to treat every person like they matter. And that's a story worth staying in the room for. 3 weeks had passed since that night in the lobby. The hotel still looked the same from the outside. Polished stone, gleaming glass, the kind of place people took photos in front of just to feel like they'd arrived. But inside? Inside, something quieter had taken root. Not a revolution with banners and speeches, but a shift in the air, like the whole building had learned to breathe differently. She hadn't planned to come back so soon. Her schedule was packed with meetings in other cities, strategy calls, investor updates. But something kept pulling her here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was just the need to see if the seeds she'd planted were actually growing. She arrived mid-morning, dressed like any other visitor, jeans, a soft sweater, sunglasses pushed up on her head. No entourage. No announcement. She walked through the front doors like she belonged because she did, but this time, she wanted to be invisible. The lobby hummed with its usual rhythm. Guests checking in, a couple laughing over coffee in the lounge, a bellhop rolling a suitcase toward the elevators. But now there were small differences. A new mural near the concierge desk, painted by a local artist, showed faces of all shades, ages, and styles with the words, "You're home here," woven through them in delicate script. Near the elevators, a digital screen rotated short guest stories. A nurse on her first vacation in years, a grandfather visiting his grandkids, a student celebrating graduation with her mom. Real people. Real joy, she smiled to herself. Not because it was perfect, but because it was trying. She wandered toward the cafe tucked in the corner, ordered a tea, sat at a small table by the window. From here she could watch without being seen. A few minutes later, a young man in a crisp uniform approached, not to serve her, but to check on an elderly guest at the next table who seemed confused by the menu. He knelt slightly, spoke slowly, pointed to pictures. Didn't rush her. Didn't make her feel small. Just helped. She remembered that young man. He'd been on the night shift during the incident. He hadn't said a word that night, but he'd been watching. And now he was leading by example. Her phone buzzed. A message from HR. Pilot training completed. 92% of staff said they feel more confident handling bias situations. Guest satisfaction scores up 18% this month. Good. But numbers weren't the whole story. She finished her tea and walked toward the staff break room, not to inspect, but to listen. The door was open. Inside, a group of housekeepers were sharing snacks and stories. One of them was showing a photo of her daughter's school play. Another was laughing about her dog stealing socks. She knocked lightly on the doorframe. They looked up, surprised but not nervous. That alone told her everything. "Mind if I join for a minute?" she asked. They made space. Offered her a cookie. No one called her ma'am or boss, just nodded like she was one of them, because in a way she was. They talked about their days, their kids, the new laundry system that actually worked. Then one of them, older with kind eyes and silver streaks in her hair, leaned forward. "I heard what happened that night," she said softly, "and I just wanted to say thank you, not just for standing up for yourself, but for standing up for all of us who've been treated like we're less than, just because of how we look." The room went quiet for a beat. Not awkward, just full. She didn't say, "You're welcome." Instead, she said, "I couldn't have done it without you all showing up every day, doing the work no one sees. That's what really keeps this place alive." Later, she met with the team that had redesigned the training program, the same clerk and operations lead from that night. They'd turned their shame into something useful. The new onboarding module didn't just talk about diversity. It asked real questions. What assumptions do you carry into a room? How would you feel if someone doubted your right to be here? What does dignity look like in action? New hires now spent their first shift shadowing housekeeping or kitchen staff, not to learn humility, but to understand that every role matters. That the guest experience starts long before check-in. She asked them how it felt to lead this change. The clerk, once so stiff behind the desk, shrugged, but his eyes were bright. "It's like, I finally get why this place matters. It's not about fancy sheets or marble floors. It's about making people feel seen," she nodded. That was it exactly. As the day wound down, she decided to take the service elevator up to the top floor, just to see. The doors opened to a hallway bathed in warm light. A housekeeper was finishing up in one of the suites. She recognized her instantly, the woman who'd spoken up in the break room. Their eyes met. No words needed. Just a small, knowing smile passed between them. Then, as she turned to leave, she noticed something on the door of Suite 1201. A small, hand-lettered note taped to the frame. Reserved for those who believe everyone belongs. Her throat tightened. She hadn't asked for that. No one had ordered it. It was just there, a quiet act of solidarity, of care. She touched the paper gently, then walked away. That evening, she sat in the hotel's small courtyard garden, the same one where she'd watched the city lights weeks before. But tonight it wasn't empty. A few guests sat on benches, sipping wine, talking softly. A couple held hands without saying a word. A solo traveler read a book under a string of fairy lights. Peace, not perfection. Just peace. Her phone rang. It was a journalist from a business magazine. They'd heard rumors about the Belonging Initiative and wanted to feature the hotel as a case study in ethical leadership. She thought about it, then said, "Only if you focus on the team, not me." This wasn't one person's moment. It was 100 people choosing to do better every single day. The journalist agreed. As she hung up, a young woman approached, nervous, clutching a notebook. She looked like she might be an intern or a student. "Excuse me," she said, voice trembling slightly. I saw you on the news once, and I just wanted to say what you did. It gave me hope. I want to build something like this someday. But sometimes it feels impossible." She looked at the young woman, not as a fan, but as someone standing at the edge of her own dream. "Nothing worth building is easy," she said gently. "But you don't have to change the whole world at once. Just the room you're in, the person in front of you. That's where it starts." The young woman nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you." "No," she said, smiling. "Thank you for believing it's possible." Later, as she walked out of the hotel for the last time that week, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel it, the hum of a place that had chosen kindness over assumption, dignity over doubt. The cab pulled away and the city swallowed her into its rhythm. But somewhere behind her, in a lobby filled with light and quiet courage, a new standard had taken hold. Not because of a viral moment, not because of punishment, but because people decided that how we treat each other matters more than how we look, what we wear, or what we assume. And that's the kind of story that doesn't just go viral. It lasts. A year had passed since the night she was turned away from her own hotel. Seasons had cycled: summer heat, autumn rain, winter frost, and now the soft green promise of spring. The city had changed in small ways. New shops, fresh graffiti on old walls, buses running on cleaner fuel. But the biggest shift wasn't on the streets. It was inside the quiet spaces where people meet, serve, and sometimes, unexpectedly, heal. She hadn't planned to come back. Not officially, but life has a way of circling back to the places that changed you. And this place? It had changed her as much as she'd changed it. She arrived on a Tuesday morning unannounced, wearing a light jacket and carrying a tote bag full of books. No fanfare, no security detail. Just a woman walking into a building she owned, hoping to disappear into the rhythm of it. The lobby greeted her like an old friend. The same marble floors, yes, but now scuffed in places from real feet, real lives. The mural still hung proudly near the concierge desk, but it had grown. Guests had added small painted tiles around the edges during weekend workshops, faces of all kinds, each with a word beneath: welcome, safe, enough, seen. At the front desk, a new face smiled warmly. Young, maybe early 20s, with bright eyes and a name tag that read Aisha. "Ask me about our community garden." "Checking in?" the young woman asked. "No," she said gently. "Just visiting?" "Ah," Aisha said, nodding like she understood more than she let on. "Well, the garden's blooming. You should see it." She hadn't known about a garden. She followed the signs down a hallway that used to lead to storage rooms. Now, one door opened to a sunlit courtyard she'd never seen before, transformed from a forgotten loading dock into a thriving patch of earth. Raised beds overflowed with herbs, tomatoes, marigolds. A small bench sat under a trellis heavy with wisteria. A chalkboard nearby read, Harvest what you need. Leave kindness behind. A housekeeper she recognized, Maria, the one who loved peppermint tea, was kneeling by a row of basil, snipping leaves into a basket. You started this? She asked, stepping closer. Maria looked up, smiling. We all did. Guests help. Staff help. Even kids from the school down the street come on Fridays. We grow food for the cafe now, and extra goes to the shelter. She knelt beside her, brushing soil from her hands. It's beautiful. It's necessary, Maria said simply. After everything, we needed something real to tend to. Something that grows because you care, not because you demand. They sat on the bench in comfortable silence for a while, watching bees drift between flowers. No agenda, no performance, just two people sharing a moment of peace. Later, she wandered into the cafe, now called The Common Cup, and ordered chamomile tea. The barista, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, handed her a mug with a small sprig of lavender tucked in the handle. Compliments of the garden, he said with a wink. She found a corner table and opened one of her books. But she didn't read. She watched. A business traveler, stressed and scrolling frantically on his phone, was offered a free pastry by the staff, just because you look like you could use a break. He blinked, then actually laughed. Real surprised laughter. A mother with a fussy toddler was given a high chair without being asked, and a warm cloth for the child's hands. No sighs, no side-eye, just care. At another table, two elderly women held hands across their coffee cups, whispering like teenagers. No one stared. No one rushed them. They were just allowed to be. This was the magic. Not perfection. Not luxury. But permission to be tired, to be messy, to be human. Her phone buzzed. A message from the regional team. 3 more hotels have launched their own belonging circles. One in Chicago even started a guest-led storytelling night. Attendance is full every week, she smiled. The ripple was spreading. But the real test came that afternoon. A man walked in, mid-50s, worn jacket, carrying a duffel bag that had seen better days. He hesitated at the door, glancing around like he expected someone to stop him. His shoes were dusty, his hands rough. The front desk clerk, Aisha, saw him immediately. Didn't flinch. Didn't call security. Just walked out from behind the counter. Hi there, she said, voice warm but not overbearing. Can I help you find something? He looked startled. I heard this place was different. That you don't turn people away just because they don't look like they belong. Aisha nodded. We don't, he swallowed. I've got a voucher from the Veterans Program. For one night. Said you honor those here? We do, she said. Let's get you checked in. She led him to the desk, typed quickly, then handed him a key card. Room 412, quiet hallway. And if you need anything, extra blanket, a hot meal, someone to talk to, just call front desk, seriously. Anytime. He stood there for a long moment, eyes glistening. Then he whispered, Thank you. As he walked toward the elevators, shoulders a little straighter, the CEO watched from the cafe doorway. Her chest felt tight, not with sadness, but with something deeper. Pride, no, gratitude. Because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about Aisha choosing kindness without being told to, about a system that trusted its people to do the right thing, about a man being treated like a person, not a problem. That evening, she attended the weekly community circle, now held in the garden when weather allowed. Blankets were spread on the grass. String lights glowed overhead. People brought dishes to share, curry, cornbread, fruit salad. No hierarchy, just neighbors. A teenager stood up to read a poem she'd written about feeling invisible at school, until she came here and a housekeeper told her, Your voice matters. The room fell silent. Then erupted in snaps, not applause, respectful, human. Later, as the sky turned deep blue, Maria handed her a small jar of honey. From our rooftop beehives, she said. We call it sweet belonging. She held the jar warm from Maria's hands. You've built something incredible here. We all did, Maria corrected gently. You just gave us the space to try. On her last morning, she sat alone in Suite 1201, her old room, now just another suite like any other. No special markings. She packed slowly, folding clothes, tucking books back into her bag. On the nightstand, she left a note for housekeeping. Thank you for making this feel like home even when I forgot it was mine. As she walked out for the final time, she stopped at the front desk. Aisha looked up. Leaving so soon? For now, she said. But I'll be back, I know, Aisha replied, smiling. We'll save you a seat in the garden. She stepped outside into the spring air, light and full of birdsong. The city roared around her, but inside she felt calm. Not because everything was fixed. She knew bias, fear, and misunderstanding still lived in the world. But because she'd seen proof that change is possible. Not through grand gestures, but through daily choices, to listen, to believe, to welcome. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not a hotel that got it right once, but 100 small moments where someone chose to see another person fully and said without words, "You belong here." She walked down the street, not looking back, but she carried it with her, the warmth, the hope, the quiet courage of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, one kind act at a time. And somewhere behind her, in a garden blooming with basil and bees, the world kept getting a little softer, a little kinder, one guest at a time.